Welcome back, people. And like me with food poisoning, shitting like a waterfall, UFC news has not stopped. UFC 5 specifically. And the deep dive has just been released, people. So I know some people think it's a reskin and maybe too similar to UFC 4. I'm holding back my judgment for the deep dive just to see if there is any big changes. If not, then I'll probably lean more to UFC 4.5, like a little upgrade. So, people, let's not keep it hanging around. Let's go. Yeah, hopefully it's good.
Welcome to the EA Sports UFC 5 gameplay deep dive. My name is Marshall Mind, and today we'll be
How you doing,
talking about
Marshall?
some brand new features designed to deliver a whole new level of MMA
Physics are
authenticity
amazing.
and immersion to the game. We'll look at features like the real impact system, new striking animations, doctor stoppages, a brand new exciting submission system,
Okay,
and
that'll be
plenty more.
interesting.
And with
Let's
that,
see the
let's
submission
get
system.
into it. The first thing I want to talk about today is the real impact
Oh,
system,
man.
which is essentially a
Cuts the throat.
catchphrase for the conglomeration of health events, facial injuries,
Oh, wow.
full body hit reactions, overall authentic damage, and the impact they have on a fight.
Jeez.
Unlike previous games where injuries to the athletes were mainly superficial,
Yeah,
UFC
that's
5
true.
introduces an innovative impact system that accurately reflects the physical toll the athlete undergoes during a match, which influences both the athlete's condition and the ultimate match results. This is demonstrated visually with the all-new damage icons.
Damage
Now, before we
icons,
get into
okay.
these icons, I can't stress enough just how much more impactful this new damage system is going to be in UFC 5. The few times that I've played against another player, every single time I got cut, it was like, oh my god, you really got to reevaluate what you're doing. You got to watch out. In
That's what I
UFC
mentioned.
5, as you guys are going to see once we start talking about these damage icons in a moment, getting cut, getting damaged, it really means something.
Makes an
It
impact.
has an impact in the way the fight actually plays out.
Tactics
The
as
vision
well.
penalty icon appears when an athlete gets cut in areas of the face where bleeding could lead to visual impairment, like the brows, the eye, the forehead, etc.
That's
This
realistic.
leads to an increase in the amount of damage you take on the affected side while the penalty is active. If no further impact occurs to the affected location in 30 seconds, the penalty is lifted. The penalty
30
is also
seconds?
lifted at the
It's a
start
bit
of a
odd.
new round.
The round I
The
can understand
breathing
because they can
penalty
patch
icon
up, but
appears when an
30
athlete
seconds?
sustains an injury to the nose or mouth. This impact will decrease the short-term stamina recovery
Ooh,
for as
wow.
long as the penalty is active. If the athlete can protect against subsequent damage to the affected area, the penalty will be lifted in 30 seconds or at the start of a new
I don't know about
round.
this 30
The
seconds
stun
thing.
icons are broken down into 3 different icons: the head stun icon, the body stun icon, and the leg stun icon. The head stun icon appears as the result of any health event to the head. The body stun icon appears as the result of any health event to the body, and the leg stun icon appears as the result of any health event to the leg. The health icons are also broken down into 3 different icons: the heart icon,
It's just sorry people to stop it. I think it's just better because it's 21 minutes. I don't want to just try and gather my thoughts at the end. So we'll just reflect every few minutes. I think the damage is incredibly realistic in this game in terms of the cut bleeding into the eye and stuff because that is a realistic thing. If you watch boxing, UFC, it's realistic. The only thing I don't agree with is 30 seconds. In 30 seconds, it would be worse. The blood pooling in your eye would get worse over time. The end of the round, I can understand because they can put Vaseline, the cut man can clean it up a bit, and it can prevent the bleeding at least until you get struck again. So 30 seconds for me, I don't understand that. Maybe if it's just the start of the round, it gives you a bit of time to obviously, try and recover, but still, I don't agree with the 30 seconds. I think end of the round would be better, that you've got to try and hang on as much as you can, protect that eye, or, protect the nose, whatever's been cut open or busted open. So, yeah, hit and miss with that, hit and miss. Um, and now the stun icons, I think that's going to be interesting as well. I think all these icons and all these different aspects is going to make you reevaluate your fight on the go. On the go, you're going to be like, my eyes busted, got to protect that side. If your breathing's messed up, you might have to slow down, try and recover, wait till the end of the round. So it's going to add different aspects. But again, it's not a huge change. It's a minor improvement, but it's better than nothing, I guess. When it comes to EA in some video games like FIFA and stuff, that the additions are so minimal. It's pretty much just It's a reskin. It's nothing different. But let's see. Hopefully, they increase and add some more features throughout this deep dive. People, let's go.
The arm health icon and the leg health icon. These icons authentically represents the effect a submission attempt can have on an athlete.
Oh wow,
The heart
really?
icon appears when a player loses a chunk of their maximum stamina due to a deep choke. The goal
Ooh,
here
that's
is
cool.
to accurately represent how chokes, especially deep ones, can negatively affect an athlete's overall stamina. The arm health icon
Realistic.
is meant to signal a loss in maximum block health due to a deep arm submission. Whether it's an armbar or a kimura, overextending the arm realistically leads to a reduction in blocking ability, and UFC 5 represents this authentically.
Yeah, that's
The leg health
pretty good.
icon
That's
signals
interesting.
a loss in permanent leg health when a player survives a deep leg lock. Leg locks, of course, are some of the most potent submissions an athlete can endure. So whether it's a deep heel hook
Can
or a
mess you
calf
up,
slicer,
especially when you put
surviving
weight
will
on it.
not leave the athlete unscathed, and UFC 5 authentically represents this reality. The next
The
thing
little
we'll
jabs.
take a look at is doctor stoppages. For the
This is
first
something I was
time
really
in the
interested
EA
in.
Sports UFC series, the doctor stoppage will now be another viable way for players to end a match. The doctor stoppage icon will appear initially as a result of any facial injury, not including injury to the mouth. At first, the icon appears yellow.
I've seen
But as
stoppages from the
subsequent
mouth.
impact is received on the affected area, the icon will appear more red. The more red the icon becomes, the closer the ref is to halting the match briefly and requesting
It's
a
cool.
doctor
Like,
check.
realistic.
If
The fighter's
doctor
trying to
examines
protest.
the injury and determines it is not severe enough to warrant a stoppage, he will exit the cage and the match will continue. However, if he examines the
That's a
injury
mess.
and
Nah,
determines that it
cut
is
that.
indeed significant enough, he will signal to the ref and the match will end.
His face
The
is a
introduction
mess.
of Doctor Stoppages to UFC 5 is just another way that the game truly delivers an authentic mixed martial arts experience. But it also
realism.
adds another layer to gameplay. Being defensively sound has never been more important, and because of this, there has been some significant enhancements to the core defensive tools in the game. Footwork, blocking, head movement, and lunges have all received significant upgrades.
That's good, 'cause the
resulting
dodging was
in
a bit-
substantial improvement
wasn't
in
that
your
great in UFC 4, to be
reliability for
honest.
defensive maneuvers.
It's a
Now,
lot of
this is an
stamina
area
as
that a
well.
lot of players definitely complained about in UFC 4,
Yeah.
right? Like pressure is too strong, block breaking is too strong, being defensively sound in UFC 4 is not as easy as it's supposed to be. And don't get me wrong, in UFC 5, when you run into a player that knows exactly what they're doing, you can definitely still get run down with strikes. But as we start talking about these new defensive tools in UFC 5 and how they've been upgraded, how they've been buffed, once you master these and once you start using them as intended, you're going to notice you'll have a lot more success in UFC 5 than you did in UFC 4 when it comes to dealing with pressure and just overall aggression. In UFC 5, head movement in all directions
that's
is
really
far
good.
more responsive.
That
It is
really-
faster
really
and
good.
it costs less stamina.
Oh.
In addition to that, the vulnerability incurred while using head movement has been reduced. Altogether, these advancements collectively establish head movement as an even more potent defensive tool in UFC 5. Lunges will now also cost less stamina as well as concede
Thank
less
you.
vulnerability,
Stamina's
which means
crazy.
players will be able to use them a bit more freely compared to UFC.
Take like 1/3 of your
And let's
stamina
not forget
bar.
about
It's nuts.
footwork. The significance of the footwork stat has been amplified in UFC 5, specifically when it comes to locomotion. Athletes with a high footwork stat will move noticeably faster, and athletes with low footwork stats will move slower. So if your goal is to operate from the outside and be slick and run circles around your opponent, this will be a much more viable strategy in UFC 5. Now, this topic of defense has always been a nagging issue in the EA Sports UFC community, and I really wanted to dive a bit deeper into this just in case I missed something, which is why I sat down with Yves Gomez, an EA Sports
Listening,
UFC
Marshall.
developer who, by the way, used to be a game changer. Some of you probably already know who this is. He explained to us a little bit deeper in regards to what we've already talked about, right? With the head movement, the lunges, the locomotion. He goes a little bit deeper and not only explains to us what they did, but also why they did it. What was the logic behind why they made those decisions that they made. So here's Eves
they
talking
needed the
about
changes.
these changes. All right, so can you
Before we get into that, people, let's just reflect on what we've just seen. The doctor stoppages, for starters. I think it's a really cool addition. It's realistic as hell. Um, but the only thing I'm thinking of when it comes to doctor stoppages is if you get hit by, say, a lucky strike or something, and it comes up as amber or red, it means the fight's going to most likely be stopped. And especially if you're the one who's on the receiving end, maybe you was dominating a fight. That's going to be a pain in the ass for some people. So it'll be interesting to see if there's any way to exploit that. If people find a way to exploit that, hopefully not, but it could be possible. Except for that, though, I think the doctor stoppages, in my personal opinion, I think are really cool. I'm really excited to see how that works. Because there's been fights on UFC 4 when you're punching a person on the same eye, it's already cut, and you're just punching and punching, there's just blood going everywhere. And in the real world, it would end up cutting more and more and more until a doctor would say, "Hey, stop! It's now becoming a danger to the fighter. We've got to stop the fight." In UFC 4, you just keep punching on it and until you knock them out, or until the fight finishes and you go to the points. So it is an interesting aspect, and also I think again when you've got your eye cut and that icon flashes up and it says basically doctors now keeping an eye on you and could possibly stop the fight. Again, you're gonna have to change your whole fight, whole game plan. Again, it depends where on what side you've been cut. You're gonna have to use your block. You're gonna have to most likely try and scrape through until the round until you can get obviously the cut man to have a look at it, and hopefully he didn't say it resets like the other things do after 30 seconds or at the end of every round. So maybe doctor stoppages continue through rounds, which would be really, really bad if you get hit in the first round and it cuts your eye, because now you're gonna have to keep an eye on that the whole fight. And it's gonna be really hard to actually attack when you've got to block your eye because you know that the person is now aware that they could possibly get the fight stopped because you've got a cut. So it will be interesting. I think they should have explained a bit more on if there is any refresh period or anything like that, or if it just continues throughout the whole fight. One thing I'm really happy to see is that the lunges and the movement be improved, because in UFC 4 when you lunged, your stamina would take such a hard hit. It's ridiculous. You take two or three lunges, your stamina bar is near enough empty. It just was painfully hard to execute because you're giving up stamina. And in UFC 4, stamina is massive. If you've got no stamina, your punches are going to be weak, your movement's going to be sluggish. You're basically a sitting duck, so to speak. So I'm very happy they've changed that and that the stamina isn't hit so hard. So now lunging, I think people will be more happy to use rather than UFC 4. It's something I don't use at all, really, unless it's unless it's absolutely necessary. I don't really use it. Just for the fact that my stamina takes such a hard hit. What am I ducking and lunging for? What's the point? Because now I'm knackered, so now I'm just gonna get punched anyway. So yeah, I think that's a really good improvement, and yeah, let's see. They're about to explain a bit more, so let's see what they got to say.
talk about how vulnerability is going to affect head movement in UFC 5?
The frames part of it is just the first part, like the first buff. And it was also
That was a nice doc.
regarding the stamina cost. It now costs a lot less across the board, and the vulnerability was decreased, and the mitigations were increased. We also added
Good blocks, man. Timing is good for
when
Adesanya.
you
Whoever's
try to
using
dodge
Adesanya.
sideways against the frontal attack, and it still catches you. So if you're trying to dodge a jab, but you don't get out of the way in time, it will still grant you a little bit of vulnerability because you're slipping out of the way. So it's like the punch is glancing off your face.
All right, so
that's
earlier
pretty
when
cool.
you said frames, are you saying that fighters with higher head movement stats will now have access to more evasive properties, which will allow them to evade shots a lot easier than, say, UFC 4?
Very slightly. It was buffed across the board by one frame. The low end is not as low as before, so a fighter with a bad head movement
Very minor improvement then.
won't be as slow. And as the fighters get tired throughout the fight, they don't get chunks of slowness added to them. Yeah, but overall, The timing of it is slightly faster and varies more granularly.
And what about with lunges when it comes to vulnerability? Has that been reduced, increased? Like,
reduce it, please.
In UFC 5 when it comes to that?
When you lunge away from a strike, you take less damage.
Good.
What about when you lunge directly into a strike? Are we still going to have vulnerability with that? Has that been increased? Has that been
Surely they increase it if you're moving into it.
Which has been decreased, yeah. It was a bit much, yeah. It was like maybe the most common way of getting like a flash KO. You can see it a lot.
And in terms of the footwork stat, right? Like showing the changes between the fighters that are faster and fighters that are a bit slower. Like we're definitely getting.
If you're lunging into a strike, surely it would increase your vulnerability. Right? That's strange.
Yeah, in comparison to UFC 4, yeah, there's a bigger contrast now. More precisely, the high end stays the same. So someone with maxed out footwork stat will remain just as fast. The change is that someone on the low end of it will be slower.
Defense is not the only important aspect of a match though, and in UFC 5, going on the offense has never felt better. UFC 5 introduces brand new animations for punches, kicks, elbows, and knees.
Physics and animations look incredible.
The new leg kick animation is beautiful, and the knees are so realistic and powerful looking. The new pivot left hook animation will come in handy when dealing with pressure, and the new front kick to the body animation is
front kicks.
And beautiful.
I'm a big fan of front kicks. I love them.
The power of next generation graphics, visual cues, as well as hit reactions showing just how impactful strikes are, have all been amplified.
UFC 4 will be a bit ragdoll.
And it makes impact with the athlete. Improved facial deformation sends a ripple through the face and body. UFC 5 has also revamped striking controls to be more dynamic, giving players a lot more control over basic strikes, advanced strikes, as well as combinations. Unlike in UFC 4, where you had to press 2 buttons simultaneously to perform a strike as basic as an uppercut.
Yeah, that was
UFC 5,
a bit annoying.
It is as simple as holding the right bumper and pressing either square or triangle for the lead and rear uppercuts.
Okay,
a new dedicated spin input has also been introduced to the game. And so rather than having to remember a multitude of button combinations for different spinning attacks, the X and circle buttons pressed together will always result in a spin. And when you pair that with another button input, like circle for example, your fighter will perform a turning side kick to the body. The button input to initiate a clinch has also changed, and it's a change that I personally really appreciate.
Yeah,
it now maintains a uniformity with the takedown input, which enhances the overall experience.
It's good. That's much better.
Triggering a clinch is as simple as simultaneously pressing square and X. But that's not all that was done to the clinch. And I definitely had to find out from Eves if anything has been done to improve the clinch from UFC 4, because I know I'm not the only one that's curious about this. A lot of players who had issues with the clinch,
was
let's
hit and
be honest,
man,
it was a sore spot in UFC 4. A lot of those same players are going to be very curious. What was done? How was it improved?
Sometimes it was hard to get
What changes are we going to see that will make our quality of life a lot better in UFC 5 in regards to the
clinch? Definitely needed some work.
Here's Eves giving us some insight into what was done to the clinch in UFC 5.
Yeah, so we did a few things. The main thing is that it is easier to prevent people from clinching you by striking them. This one frustrating thing is that, okay, you're gonna clinch me, I'm just gonna punch out of it. But in UFC 4, almost always you would punch them and they'll clinch you through it as an exchange. Exchanges into the clinch can still happen, but if you're punching someone with a straight attack, we figured out it would make sense that that should be the thing that would kind of push their face away, not let them clinch you.
Yeah, sure. So
any jab with straight will nullify a clinch.
That's good.
Now, furthermore, any retreating attack, like any sort of retreating attack, makes the clinch not stick to you. You're moving away, right? So they can't clinch you.
Again, that's a good improvement. Minor, but good.
More subtle changes to the flow of when you're striking someone as you're trying to escape the clinch. For a specific window, they can't block when they're actually exiting, right? That is still possible, but it is harder to do now, and it is especially harder from the cage single under position. But the defensive striking the clinch is generally more powerful than it seems. The truth is that if people clinch you through your strike, you actually have the upper hand. If you continue to strike, it will take them out of what they're trying to do. Like it will interrupt the knee that they try to throw you and stuff like that.
Now let's delve into what I consider to be the most exhilarating transformation in EA Sports UFC 5.
So the grappling?
The seamless submission mechanics.
Yeah, okay.
For
That's
the
part of
first
the grappling.
time
That'll be
in
interesting.
EA Sports UFC history, submissions are now performed without relying on a minigame. In earlier iterations like UFC 4, triggering a submission,
UFC 4.
be it a joint lock
Never
or a
used them.
chokehold,
Terrible.
necessitated engaging in a minigame to secure or counter the move.
Wasn't
This
fun.
element was somewhat detached from the core grappling system. However,
Takes you out of the
in
game.
UFC 5, this dynamic has been seamlessly integrated, making a groundbreaking evolution. Allow me to explain. Upon initiating a submission in UFC 5, for example, a guillotine, you'll have two choices. You can choose to force your opponent to submit by crossing both feet behind their back and squeezing, leading to a tap, or you can choose to advance to the mount, a more advantageous position. And although you gave up the submission, you secured another favorable position. As the attacker, the direction of your inputs will always remain the same regardless of the submission. Up to submit, and down to advance to another dominant position.
That's
As
pretty
the
cool.
player who's defending, the directions of your input will also always remain the same.
Transition to a mount, that's pretty cool.
Submission.
From the submission.
Left to escape and also right to escape. Now, I understand the potential worry that this new submission system could oversimplify submission and make them too easy. Well, rest assured, the team accounted for this concern because in tandem with the regular HUD displaying head, body, and leg health, an additional gauge now shows your submission health. Depending on the strength of the submission your athlete's submission defense stats, as well as your current stamina level, it might require as many as 3 submission attempts to completely deplete your submission health. And when that happens, the submission is instantaneous. It is important to note that despite this protective
high
measure,
submission stats, it's going to be hard for people to fight you.
remain plausible in UFC 5. These occurrences are exceptional and typically happens when a player has severely mismanaged your stamina, granting the attacker a substantial stamina advantage upon initiating the submission. When it comes to submissions in UFC 5, stamina is king, so make sure to manage yours. Contextual submissions have also been expanded in UFC 5. If you find yourself in side control and you try to escape to half guard by framing and bridging up, be careful because your opponent could very well counter that with an arm triangle.
Oh, that's
if
very
you
cool.
find yourself entangled in a rubber guard and you try to recover the full guard, also be careful because you could find yourself fighting off an arm bar. UFC 5 introduces a multitude of contextual submissions that, once mastered, imbue the ground game with a heightened sense of authenticity. Adding to the authenticity of the ground game, the ground and pound system has also been revamped. All new ground and pound animations, from straight punches to hooks, including high impact elbows to the head and body, accurately captures the visceral reality of ground and pound. And unlike past iterations of the game, when you stop the opponent on the ground, the reaction is believable. So we've talked about the brand new submission system. We've talked about context.
Yeah, just to quickly go to the talk about the submissions there. I'm in favor of definitely changing what they had because the minigames were awful. It detached you from the game. It pulls you out of the game at the moment. The pump, the hype, it just pulls you out of it. And you're playing some silly minigame that, to be honest, they weren't that good anyway. So, you know, for me, I think the submissions were something they needed to work on. I'm glad they have done. Submission bar is not a bad idea. I mean, it's different. It is seamless, so you don't have to really get detached from the game because now you have a bar to tell you how vulnerable you are to submissions. But I fear that if somebody has higher submission stats and you are not keen on your submission defense stats, you're in trouble if you go to the ground, and it will be just a case of you trying to stop them from taking you down. Because once they do, you're pretty much in trouble. Which isn't a bad thing because some fighters favor striking, some fighters favor submissions, grappling. So it's all different. But I think going forward with this game, I think a lot more people will be aware that your submission defense stats are going to have to be something you worry about because the worst thing is to have great striking, um, great power, great speed, great accuracy. You know your blocking's brilliant, your lunging's great, but then when it comes to it, the guy just takes you down, and within a couple of minutes, your submission bar is pretty much empty, and now that's it. You're vulnerable to a submission, and the fight ends. So for me, I think that that's something people have to be aware of now. That there is a bar. So now submission defense is going to be a big thing for people who don't want to attack people's submissions. So for instance, me, I love kickboxing. That's the kind of fighter I build on UFC 4 as a kickboxer. So my submission defense isn't that great, which I don't worry about because the mini games I'm pretty good at. But now it's not a mini game; it's now a submission bar. So it's going to be something you have to keep an eye on, and submission defense will be key. Um, the transitions that I've seen so far look brilliant. They do look seamless. They look more expansive than UFC 4. Um, and also the way that you can do things like go into full mount and stuff like that from a submission attempt is pretty cool. That's totally different. So it could keep fighters guessing he's going to go for the submission. The contextual submissions I thought was pretty cool as well. Another thing to keep you guessing, another thing that's unpredictable. So I find that really interesting. Overall, I think the submission has been improved vastly, which is good because it needed it. That was one of the biggest gripes I had with UFC 4. I was like, oh god, a mini game again, and then you get out of it, back into a mini game again, get out of it, and you're just sitting there going back and forth. And it becomes really dull. It becomes very tedious. So yeah, I'm glad they've improved. I'm pretty excited for that. But again, this is a minor improvement, not massive, minor improvement. It's not game changing to an extent, but an improvement that is welcomed in my eyes, 100%. So yeah, let's kick on with the vid and
With
see.
submissions, we've talked about the brand new ground and pound, but I'm sure a lot of people still have questions in regards to the core ground game, right? Like, how is it different from UFC 4? What else was done to it in UFC 5?
Yeah, grappling was
Once again, I sat down with
all
Yves
right.
Gomez,
Wasn't
and he's
amazing.
going to talk about some changes that might not be immediately noticeable, but they'll still have a major impact in the way the game actually plays.
So
on
minor
the
improvements
ground.
again?
If
or-
you have pretty much a whole round on the ground, your stamina, like your permanent stamina consumption, should be similar to if you have a whole round striking. The ground won't be like a refuge of almost no stamina cost anymore. With the new submission systems, seamless submissions, we added a lot of depth, but we didn't want it to be intimidating for new players or players who are starting to grapple. You can play grapple assist within submissions. It all flows like for a casual player. Like it's pick up and play. You're not going to play at a high level, but you're not going to get stuck. Now there's no more mini game, and when you're using grapple assist
Does look a lot more
continues
seamless.
to work as you get into the actual submission. You can use the submission intent to just keep going and finish your opponent. If you're defending, just trying to get up, you can keep just doing that. Or if you're trying to ground and pound, you can escape a submission right into a ground and pound position.
Oh, that's
Punish
pretty
your
cool.
opponent for doing it.
That's good.
Trying to submit you. You can even, as a defender, use the submission intent to counter a submission to one of your own if your fighter can do that. A lot of the fanciest things in this
That's
system
interesting.
actually happens a lot. You get to see a lot of cool animations because you're often sort of, especially if you have two beginners playing with grapple assist, you're constantly racing. And when you're racing, like, you
Reckon
know
Khabib,
that's
what
when you
fight
see
that was.
the cool
Oh,
stuff, right? We
so
get
happy
into an
Khabib
armbar,
won.
like immediately, you try to escape, I try to finish, we go into a belly down arm bar, you flip, and then end up inside your leg. All of these crazy stuff, the coolest stuff, actually happens a lot when you're playing.
It is seamless.
In your own
It's
pace,
fluent,
you
man.
can
It's
start to
brilliant.
explore depth and changing your controls and so on and so forth.
Wow,
And
look at
there are
that.
More changes.
What a
to it now.
transition. Wow.
So it was almost impossible to get to back mount and back flat positions, because when you're doing it, the people could just roll for free and end up back sitting, which is a little less dominant for you. They cannot do that for free anymore. If they have a stamina advantage, they can do that, just like in UFC 4. If they don't, they can't. So now there is a new contextual transition there for when you're trying to get back mount and they're trying to roll. It's a brand new result. I won't say what it is, but it's not back sitting. Now it should be much
Holding
more
it back.
viable to get to the actual back mount and back flat and use the submissions from there, which are supposed to be very juicy, and they are.
With the real impact system, intuitive striking controls, improved defensive tools, and all new submission mechanics, EA Sports UFC 5 offers the most immersive, authentic, and exciting mixed martial arts gameplay experience to date.
Okay. 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 That was interesting. For me, coming off the bat, my own personal opinion, I'm gonna say it's UFC 4.5. Now, that's not an insult. UFC 5 looks like they put a lot of work and effort into it. It looks incredible. Everything about it is appealing to me as a UFC player, and a fan of UFC. But it just feels more like the improvements they made, whilst numerous, they're minor improvements. I say submission is probably the biggest improvement, the biggest change out of the lot, whereas everything else is like the doctor stoppages and stuff like that. That's like a little cherry on the cake kind of thing. It's something that's added and welcomed, but it's not something that's game changing, revolutionized. No. Um, and then with everything else, like the grappling, the lunge stamina, things like that, again, it's welcomed and definitely needed for UFC to be improved. But it's not like, oh my gosh, they've changed the game. Like this, my mind's blown. What the hell's going on? They haven't changed across the board a lot of things that they could have. I'm still interested in to see things like the career mode training. I think the career mode training, if you've played the career mode in UFC 4, the training is it can be very dull. It can be very repetitive. It's the same thing. You spar for 2 minutes. You've got a little objective like maybe land 5 strikes, or maybe avoid 10 strikes or something, or to get full mount, stuff like that. It's just this very minor, one objective things that you've got to do for 2 minutes, and after you've done that, you just carry on dancing around, punching, throwing a few kicks, grappling, and it stops, and that's it. That's your training done. You could also promote your fight, which I think is pretty good. The promoting was a good thing because it hypes the fight, so that was good. You can also invite a fighter down to spar with them, like for instance jonjones, and learn something off of him, one of these moves. So that was good. But I think with the career mode, I'd like to see what they've done with that, if they've changed it up, or if it's going to be like, I mean, I hate to say it, FIFA, I'm a big fan of. I didn't buy it last year because for me, FIFA has gone down this road of Ultimate Team being the holy grail, and then everything else being something that they don't really care about, and maybe tweak one little thing and just say, boom, that's it. We've changed it this year. It's amazing. Look at this huge change we've got. No, it's a minor change. Older FIFA games had more options and more things to do on the career mode than the new games. So while career mode, manager and player, and clubs have all recessed, Ultimate Team is the big thing because it makes the most money, which I get it from a business point. Yeah, great. You want to make money, and that's the big thing you want to invest in because everyone spends money on it, and that's a big part of your income. But you've also got to remember most of the fans who got FIFA to where it is played career mode. It's what we grew up on. So when you start to take that away and not really treat it as the same as you do with Ultimate Team, you lose people, you'll lose fans, you'll lose players. Hence why FIFA 23, I didn't buy it. A load of my friends didn't buy it. Family members didn't buy it. It didn't really do anything. It was just a reskin. So UFC 5, I'm not going to say it's a reskin. It's definitely not a reskin. They've done a lot of improvements, but it's minor improvements across the board. Nothing major, nothing game breaking, nothing that you can see and be like, okay, this has changed the whole UFC gaming world. Like this has flipped on its. They haven't done that. So for me, I'd say UFC 4.5 this is. It doesn't mean I'm not going to buy the game and play it because I'm a UFC fan. I'm definitely going to play it and I can't wait to start a new career mode. I have got a career mode on UFC 4. If you want to check it out, go check it out. We're on the road to GOAT status. And we haven't forgotten about that. I am playing UFC 4 still and going to upload a part very soon. It's just with the trailers and information dropping from UFC 5, I feel it's best to come on here fresh as soon as it comes out, give you my thoughts, talk through it with you. Um, and I have to say, I am hugely appreciative for the last video getting, I think it's nearly 2,000 views, um, a bunch of comments, a load of likes. I'm very thankful because these comments I've now been able to reply to and engage with the community. So for me, it's huge. I'm very thankful, and I love hearing your thoughts. Some people are like, "Oh, it's just a reskin." Some people are saying it's 4.5. Some people are excited. Some people are not. So it's brilliant to see both sides of some people hyped, some people don't really care. Some people are going to buy it. Some people are giving it a miss. I love it. I want to hear from both parties, and it's been really interesting reading your comments, and it's super exciting to engage with you all. I do plan on playing FIFA soon. Contradicting what I said that FIFA hasn't made improvements this year. The career mode has had some improvements. Again, minor across the board, EA, but still, it's hugely appealing to me. So we're going to start a FIFA career mode, and I hope that you find that exciting, and I hope you join me. It'll be very fun. It'll be a journey, that's for sure. Especially when I lose in the last minute and go crazy and start growing grey hair, and getting stressed. um, but as always, people, I thank you for this. And drop your thoughts. Let me know what you think. If this is going to be a game changer for you, or is this like it's UFC 4, the fresh lick of paint? Let me know. I'm interested. If you've liked this, drop a like. It gives me a heads up to create more content like this because it's something you enjoy. And subscribe because there is more stuff coming on the way. I am going to do story games as mostly reviews going forward because I like to play things like UFC 5, UFC 4, sorry, and the new FIFA. I like to bring those out as episodes because it's progressive, whereas a story mode, it could be 50, 60 hours and having to go through all that. It can be tedious, and to be honest, some parts of story games are a bit dull. So I think it's just best to put all the best bits into one part and then do a review. I think that'll be brilliant for people to really get my thoughts on the game instead of having to wait 50 parts because it can be very strenuous for some people, especially if you don't have the time. You can't watch an hour-long video one after another. So yeah, people, that's all from me. Let me know what you think down below. Drop the likes if you enjoyed it. Subscribe because there's more on the way as always, people. And yeah, I'm pumped for the game. And as soon as it comes out, we'll be starting that new career mode. So I hope you join me. Until next time, people, to all my peeps and peepettes, as always, peace.